Hey everybody, today I got Nathan Walker from the NativeScript team, and he's going to help us set up a brand new mobile development environment for NativeScript development. Now, I've already installed Xcode because that takes a while. I don't want you sitting through that, and I've got Android Studio installed. The rest is we're starting from scratch. Yeah, we've got a Mac Studio with the M1 Ultra chip, brand new, and we're setting up a new mobile development environment. Now, I do have to say that I'm planning to use this thing for my own personal use, so I want to make sure that we're doing this right. Nathan, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure thing. Hey, everybody. Nathan Walker here. I serve currently on the NativeScript Technical Steering Committee, which is a broad, diverse group of people who have some input and work on NativeScript broad, far, and wide, all different aspects of it. I also work within Studio. We work on client projects on a daily basis, and so we're involved a lot in professional NativeScript developments in all sorts of different capacities. So this is a topic that we're in really on a daily basis, so it's great to touch on this.
All right, let's get into it.
I think it's worth stating, have you done anything here previously? I think, is there anything that's installed on this as yet? You got this new machine, you booted it up. Is there anything you've done thus far?
Yeah, so I have installed Docker, I installed Xcode, and I've installed Android Studio. I haven't done any other setup here.
Nice. And that's good to note. I think for people who are watching this, Xcode, best place is just from the App Store itself. It can take a while depending on your connection time. So Alex here pre-installed that. I don't think you've even opened it yet, or have you?
I
Alex, have you opened it?
I have opened it because I believe it requires you to install some additional components the first time you open it. So you want to make sure you do that.
Yeah, so it didn't prompt you this time. So most people who install Xcode for the first time, it's good to go ahead and launch it. Once it's done installing, it will prompt with a dialog. It'll ask to install command line tools. Usually agree to that, and once that's done, then everything's good there. We can go ahead and quit Xcode at this point, and then the other thing that you did is you installed Android Studio. We can probably take a look in there. Probably worth launching that. Just make sure that your install of Android Studio is, operable. Make sure it launches, it runs. For the welcome screen, you can just go through next here. Probably all the defaults, nothing specific here. Yep, and looks like this is just some license agreements. It looks like it's also trying to install, but typically you first install Android Studio, accept the terms, the default settings that it's wanting to do is totally fine. Go ahead and run through those. We get to see how fast Alex's network connection is here. Looks like it's pretty fast.
By the way, the version of Android Studio that we're working with is this one. This is the Bumblebee patch 2.
And this was downloaded from, if you go in the browser, is this just the default Android Studio Mac install? You might even pull that doc up just in a browser. I guess that's
exactly.
I think if you Google Android Studio install, I think it's the first hit usually.
Yep, this is exactly where I went. Yeah. And I clicked on this.
There you go. Yeah, and that should, I know they do an auto detection of platform there, so usually that should give you the right one no matter what you're on. Once this is done, the only reason we're opening this is probably just to take a peek at what SDK is set up in the SDK manager. Typically, a fresh install of Android Studio will install the latest, which is what we want. So we're just going to take a moment just to make sure that is the case. As time moves on, it can always shift up to the latest major version, which oftentimes is going to be okay, but it's always worth taking a look. So let's finish this. It should launch the IDE. And what we want to do, I know they changed this around just recently. I think you might have to just probably do new project, just open the main IDE window. I think they,
are you looking for the SDK manager?
Yeah, let's go SDK manager. There you go. So for people who haven't seen that before, that's a quick way to get into that SDK manager from that screen.
Yeah, they recently moved it to that more options, which is more convenient than it used to be.
Yes, yes. So the IDE does change a bit over time. So it's worth stating that sometimes you may see something in a video somewhere in a docs that may look slightly different. They are adjusting that from time to time. In here, what I always like to do to get more detail, by default, when you open the SDK manager, you can see down at the bottom those two checkboxes: hide obsolete packages and show package details. Uncheck hide obsolete. We want to see everything, and then do show package details. And that's a good way to get like a real detailed look to what's set up here. We can see now with those options that there actually are 3 additional things related to 32 SDK that we probably should go ahead and set up. It's Google Play services there. And so what I would do is probably uncheck the default and then check again. So it checks everything related to API 32. And then that's going to be good for this window. The next thing is the SDK tools tab at the top, right there. So do the same thing in this window. So uncheck hide obsolete and check show package details down at the bottom. It always does that by default. And here we want to probably uncheck the RC. So this is actually really great. And this is really why it's a good idea to look at this first. Typically, when we set up Android or Xcode, we don't want any beta or pre-releases, even though it probably works with those. We just want the latest stable version that's out there. So we're going to make sure the RC is not in our way and interfering. We just want latest 32 that's there. And you can go ahead and do apply and OK here, and that should go ahead and straighten you out. So that'll install the SDK 32 stuff that typically you want. I guess it's worth noting that it's not absolutely required. It depends on really what you're working on, what you're going to develop on. If you're developing an Android app that has Google Play services in use, like if you're using Google Pay, or if you're going to use Firebase, which ties into Google Play services, then that's why you want that stuff there. So it's typically, this is just kind of a good practice thing to do when you set up a computer. And it's something that I think is worth checking on as time moves on. As new SDKs come out, you might be opening Android Studio SDK Manager just to see what you got. And you may want to update to newer versions of SDKs there from time to time. I'm trying to think any other notes related to Android Studio in this way. This is also the place where you'd set up an emulator. So probably one key difference between Android Studio and Xcode is that Xcode always comes pre-installed with the latest iOS SDK and simulators. So when you run a NativeScript app, it's always going to kind of default open a simulator already. For Android, usually it wants to open an emulator that is available through Android Studio. And by default, when you install Android Studio, it doesn't set up any emulators. So that's a kind of a key difference between Android Studio and Xcode. So typically, why we're straightening this out is to make sure we're in a bill of good health as far as Android goes. And then we can open the emulator manager there and set up a kind of default emulator for us to work with. Now, we don't have to do this right now. This is really something you could do later. It just depends, if you're going to start working with Android right away, or if you're going to do predominant iOS development. Totally depends on what you're getting into, but more just a matter of best practice things to look at when you set up a machine.
Gotcha.
So while that's going, we could probably shift to the NativeScript docs, and we can come back to this.
Yeah, Google must be very busy today. All right, nativescript.org, here we are.
So we can go to docs here, and in the docs there is an environment setup guide that walks through all the things that you really need to do. And it defaults, it goes from Windows, Android, iOS to Mac, Android, iOS. So obviously we're working on a Mac, so we'll go to Mac and Android, and we'll just go down the line here. So Mac and Android, will state that we did a few things that are mentioned in here that we did as preface, just to avoid the lengthy install if it took some time to install. But Android Studio obviously was already pre-set up. We were looking at that. But the first thing it mentions here in this the stepwise guide is brew install node. And rather curiously, I'm going to ask Alex not to do that. This is a pro tip. So we are doing this from a pro side, if you will. We definitely have some suggestions along this. And we are going to set up NVM instead. And this is something that myself personally always recommend. We have it in the doc stated for this, but there are multiple node version managers, so you don't strictly need to use NVM. There's also there's some other node version managers. Anything like that is going to be okay. We'll use NVM in this example because it's the one I'm most familiar with. But the reason from a professional level why we always recommend a node version manager is that you do often in your life as a JavaScript developer have to shift between node versions. And when you update, sometimes you want to update and try out a new version without wiping out your whole global install. So node version manager allows you to kind of easily jump in and out of different node versions. It's nice that way. Brew install node is going to install it globally for the system, which is okay if you know you're going to stick with one node version there for a while, and when node versions update, you kind of have a good idea of how to move in and out of globally installed modules. I'll tell you, it can be trickier than you might expect when the whole node is set up globally. Long story short, I would go with the pro tip here and install node version manager.
Pro tip, we're going to be like pros today. Good, we'll use that. Let's check on our Android installation. Okay, it looks like it's done. I'm going to click finish there. Are we good to go with this one?
This one is probably good. You could do okay. Go ahead and cut out of that. We can get back to Android Studio in a bit, or we could take a moment now and we could open the Android emulator and just set up an emulator. Probably either way.
Okay, so that would be Virtual Device Manager.
Yes.
Oh, there's already one there for us.
Oh, there is. So I was totally wrong. I guess Android Studio does set up one by default. I don't know if that's always been the case. Maybe I was just wrong about that altogether, but does look like there's one set up. You could try to just run it. Just make sure the emulator runs.
And that's the ARM emulator, so it should be nice and quick on an ARM system.
It should be.
There it goes. Now, on Intel-based machines, this used to be using the Haxum emulation, right? The virtualization.
Right. Yeah, the ARM64 and M1, I know some people have asked questions here and there, and there's definitely been sort of like, there've been some moving targets there over the past, year and a half, I guess, ever since they introduced M1s. But M1 is definitely a stable system to develop on. I develop on it full time and have been for several months now. So it's definitely a great Mac system to develop with, and definitely would not fear moving to an M1. It's everything does work well there.
So should we quit out of here?
You could quit Android Studio now. We're pretty much done with that for now.
Okay.
Yeah, next is Node. So I would click on that NVM link that's linked there in the pro tip, and let's just go through this installation. I think it uses a curl command to install. Looks like that one right there.
There we go.
That should work.
Now, do I need to run this under sudo or anything like that?
I don't know. And that's actually probably another benefit of NVM in general, because it installs with the user instead of sort of like a global root, system-wide thing. So NVM is probably nicer in that regard because it's all user-based.
Okay, so let's run that. Install NVM. Okay, so that was pretty quick. Is it done?
It looks like it's done, although, let's see, it says profile not found, create one of them, run the script again. So yeah, here's something that probably a lot of people would see. The shell that is set up on Macs now, I think is Z shell. So in fact, if you go to terminal and preferences there, we should be able to confirm that. It should be Z shell. Go to, yeah. I can't quite make out the screen clear enough.
Yeah, it's been Z shell. That's right.
There you go. Yeah, if you can always check what shell you're in. It might be Bash. It was Bash for a long time actually with Mac. They switched to Z shell I forget exactly when that occurred, but it's been Z Shell for a while now. So just what that comment mentions there, it says profile not found. And this is because this is a fresh system. There is no Z Shell RC, and it just mentions the potential terminal profiles that you could have depending on your system. So what we want to do is open, you just cleared that, didn't you?
I did. Do we need it? It's right here.
Yeah. Oh yeah. We do want to keep this around because it's actually telling us what to do. So profile not found.
Okay.
What we want to do is it says create one of them, run the script again, or you can append the following. So you could do exactly that. Create one of them, create the Z Shell RC. You could just open it and save it just so there is one there. And then you could just run that command again if you want. That's probably the easiest thing to do.
If I don't know what I have, if I have one of them already, if I had one already, it would use it, right? And it wouldn't give me this message. But what if I had bash instead? And what if I have both of them, the bash and the Z Shell RC?
That's a good question. I don't know if I've been in that situation myself, but it's possible. You could have been on a system that maybe you switched to Z Shell yourself and maybe you had both of those. I'm honestly not sure what it would do in that case, but it's a consideration worth noting. I think you just want to make sure you know what shell you're in, if you're in Z Shell or bash. And you don't have to know the details of Unix scripted programming in this respect, just generally, kind of note again from the terminal preferences if it's showing bash or Z Shell there. Okay. That's most likely going to be the two scenarios. But
so to create a brand new file, I can just do touch and then the name of the file.
Yes, and you're already in the home directory, so that should put it exactly where it needs to be.
And the home directory is, if you type pwd, you get your home, which is users, and then your username. So that's your home. Okay, yes. So now we should have that file. And if you check that, there it is.
There it is.
So if I run the script,
go up in your history through the up arrow keys, and there, just run that again. And let's see, it looks like it did. Appending NVM source string, appending bash, close and reopen your terminal. So that's important right there to keep in mind. Anytime you modify your, Z Shell or shell profile, you do want to reload the terminal, and that's probably the easiest thing to do. You can reload it within the same window, but I'd probably just open a new tab, like Command T to open a new tab.
So this I just wanted to show this real quick, that it actually, that script populated the Z Shell RC file with this information to let the system know where to find the shell, or NVM.
Yep, and this is good to know about NVM. Basically, what that's doing, and it's loading the NVM directory from your home directory there, and that is what's setting and defining what node version is your default. And with NVM, you can set any default that you want with that. So if you do NVM right here, list, you can see that we have nothing installed. So this is a confirmation that we did install NVM correctly. So now NVM lets you install any node version at this point. So you can do NVM install. We can install the latest, like 17. You can mention NVM install node, which would inherently install the latest. You can also just state the major version here, NVM install 16, NVM install 15, 14, 12, whatever. And that will always pick up the latest series of that major version. So that's typically how you can install.
Why wouldn't we use the latest? Why would we use an older version than the latest?
Typically, you're going to be fine on the latest, and in this case, definitely install the latest. Just do NVM install node here, and we won't even use the major version, and just confirm that for sure. You can see that pulls 17.8, which should be the latest version. And if you do NVM list now, you can see the first time that you install node into NVM, it does set that to your default. If you Google around NVM set default or change default, you'll find all sorts of material on setting your default. I have to Google it every time myself, but I think it's something like NVM set default alias And you can specify the same thing like the major, like 17, 16. As far as versions, what you want to install, the latest should always be fine unless you see like noted otherwise. If there is something pinned on, say, the NativeScript repo that says, just keep this in mind for this, node version. If there's nothing like that pinned anywhere, then typically latest is going to be fine. Different frameworks that you work with, like from React to Angular to Vue, sometimes those vendors will have node engine ranges specified in there. So depending on what frameworks you're mentioning, sometimes it might complain if it doesn't fall within the range that they're supporting. A lot of times it doesn't mean necessarily it doesn't work with that version. It's just that's like the recommended range. So just kind of general node things to keep in mind. But now if you do node-v here, you should confirm it should print, of course, exactly that version, 17. Now, if you do npm-v, that should confirm what npm node comes pre-installed with npm, and that should also be the latest npm version 8.5. That's it. We're done with that.
Okay.
So moving on into docs.
All right, so that was Node. Next is this, JDKs?
That's right. So this will make sure that you got the right Java version and it's using the right setup there. So you can copy and paste these commands.
Now, doesn't Android Studio come with Java?
It does. Am I pronouncing that right? Timorin. That is the recommended kind of Java setup there nowadays for Java. And so Android Studio, I'm not sure that they're using that by default still. So this is a good practice to run this for sure. In time, it's possible maybe that is set up from there, but that is a question for perhaps someone more well-versed in that particular topic. But I would run those commands as they are stated in the docs there.
Okay. Now we might run into a little issue here because brew is not a recognized command on my machine.
Yeah, that's it. That's a good one for a new machine as well. So we probably do want to install Homebrew, which is recommended there. So yeah, let's open that link. And we can see another command we can copy. And let's just run that command to make sure we got Homebrew set up there.
Let's clear this. Homebrew installation. Oh.
It is going to try to run it sudo for you, which makes sense. And I can't remember if that's a long install. I think it goes pretty quick.
This one is installing command line tools for Xcode 13.3. Does that mean that every time you update Xcode, you need to run the installation of Homebrew again so it can install the command line tools?
Definitely not. I think this is probably something that it's doing as sort of a precautionary thing during the install there. Command line tools for Xcode are always going to be invoked once you launch Xcode yourself. So this is probably something that it picked up that your system had and is just running it as a precautionary, perhaps. Don't quote me on that because I'm not 100% sure, but I wouldn't be concerned about this, that's for sure.
So it's reinstalling command line tools even though Xcode already installed it, just to make sure it's on there.
Yes, that looks to be the case. I guess the main thing to keep in mind with Brew is that it's typically going to set things up in sort of a global fashion a lot of times for the system. Like you can override that in your bash profiles with the path directory, but I think the docs state it pretty well as far as what to do through Brew or otherwise. So best we'll stick with everything that's stated there with the exception of Node. So again, just to restate that, because I think it is a confusing point that we are saying, hey, let's not use Brew to install Node, even though the docs state that, and we're going to go the pro tip route. It's possible the docs may state using a Node version manager instead of stating Brew in the future. But yeah, as a pro level tip, the Node version manager is gonna be a really good way to go.
So to make sure you don't go the wrong way, install Homebrew after Node, and that way you can't mess up.
That's true.
Now there's one more thing that people always have already installed in their system, especially JavaScript developers. They go to the Node.js website and they download the installer. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, that's a good point too. Yeah, I mean, if you're going to use a Node version manager, you probably don't want to do that either. So it could probably falls more in line with that pro tip there. If you're going to go the pro tip route, which we recommend, then I would just strictly use NVM to deal with your Node versions rather than a downloadable package.
Okay. All right, so it looks like it installed, but it's not completely done yet. We have to still do this step, right?
Run these 2 commands in your terminal to add Homebrew. So yeah, you can run those things there.
Because otherwise Brew doesn't work right out of the box, right? We need to point it. Well, now it's saying it's going to write that to a new file called zprofile. We already have a ZSRC file, right? ZShellRC file. Why can't we put that in there?
You can actually, yeah. So you can do ZShellRC. I'm actually not entirely sure if you have both, what occurs in that case, but you can try it as stated. I don't think it would hurt you, but let's try it.
So I'm going to, let's see, these are two lines that I need to add.
You should be able to copy and paste both of them and run them, I think would also be fine.
Okay, so the first line actually adds that script to the new file. Let's do that. Okay, and then the second line evaluates the installed brew command, I guess. Okay, so now I should be able to run brew. There we go.
There you go.
And now I have a new file in my home directory called zprofile. There it is.
You could probably open that up and just see. I assume the only thing that's in it is what it just put in it there. Yeah.
Yep.
Should be fine. Obviously, it worked, and we're loading Z shell. You could try opening a new terminal like Command T. Oftentimes, if you open a new terminal, if you close the window, open another one, that's fine. You can also Command T to open a terminal, and you can close the other terminal tab there. Kind of a quick way rather than quitting terminal and relaunching it, for example. But if do like node v here, just to make sure that NVM, of course, engage. Yep, that's all fine. Then call brew. And that's fine too. So yeah, looks like
we're good to go.
Health. So let's run those commands there. And this is just going to make sure the Java version is correct to make sure our Android development environment is set up in good health. And all this is running pretty fast, so that's great. Then the other command there, let's just copy that one. And I think that actually might be it for the Android setup.
It's a lot easier than I remember.
Yeah. Yes. And while that's downloading there, let's go back to the docs and let's just see what else Android-wise do we have to do here. Oh yeah, the Android home. Yeah, we'll definitely probably set that next here.
So we did things a little bit out of order than the environment setup recommends, but that's okay, right?
Yeah, I mean, let's clarify. The only thing we did out of order really is we installed Brew after we set up Node, and we set up Node with NVM instead of using Brew. Everything else is to the letter here. And again, just a pro tip. It's a pro tip. Definitely recommend. I think typically you're going to be a much happier JavaScript developer if you're using a Node version manager versus kind of globally installed Node.
Okay, successfully installed. I like to see that.
So the next thing, just moving straight down, the Android home. This is a important variable environment-wise. It just makes sure that all the binaries related to the Android SDKs can be seen and invoked from the command line. So you can often copy and paste what they have there. It depends on kind of how, detailed you are with your profile setup, how long you've been around software development. Maybe you set up your path variables specifically a certain way, but you can always add to your existing path variable to make sure that binaries that you want available there without prefixing the directory are available. So in this case, it's a fresh machine. I'd probably just take those commands as they're stated and just paste them in. I don't think there's any.
We're going to use this file, right?
That's right, the Z shell RC. And as we saw, the Z profile also looks like it would work as well, but Z shell RC is where we've got NVM, so we might as well keep all of our stuff together here. That should be it.
Right. And let's save it. Yes.
And you could probably now at this time again launch another terminal window just to make sure it's reloaded. Again, you can reload within the same terminal. It's just an easy thing for most people that aren't super familiar with shell commands and that sort of thing.
Good, it's in there.
There we go. All right, so now continuing on with the docs there. So what's the next thing that we have? So yeah, let's go ahead and install the NativeScript CLI globally.
No need for sudo here.
No, and that's, again, you could run into trouble there if you had set up your node globally and perhaps you installed it globally through sudo. You might run into issues there. But again, this is why we took the pro tip line, because node's set up for the user directory, so we really shouldn't have to install anything globally through sudo node related, which is what we want. So you can do it that way, or you can do ns-v, works as well as a shorthand. That'll give you the same. So we got the latest CLI installed. If it says up to date, then you are good to go. Then yeah, I guess you could run ns-doctor android there and see if it detects anything that we may have missed or did not do right.
Okay.
You can choose yes or no there. That is up to you.
Hey, look at that. All green check marks.
That's fantastic.
Love to see that.
I think we are done with Android at this point. So Android is, usually it takes longer than that. So that was actually pretty painless. So yeah, let's move on to iOS. And again, we already did the node setup, so we're already done with that portion.
Right. Okay. So all this is just repetition of what you've done before. So we don't need to do this again on a Mac if we've already done it for Android.
Correct.
And we've already installed Xcode. It's already on there. What's this thing about locations? Should we check that?
Most of the time, if you've launched Xcode already, you're going to be good to go there. Probably just more a matter of, if you're checking all your points there, that's probably something just to take a peek at. But yeah, command line tools should be set there. We can open Xcode real quick and double check it. Should be fine.
But we can also run TNS-doctor for iOS as well, right? And it'll tell us if there's a wrong configuration for that.
You can.
Oh, look at that. Look at that.
Hey,
look at
there
that.
You go. So
it's not there.
That is, so again, this is why it's always good to probably just check a few things as you're going through this. Also is why it's noted in the docs. So if you choose command line tools there in the dropdown and select that, and then, we'll ask you to authenticate with your user account. And it's a good thing we looked at that. So, again, things that are mentioned in the docs really, even though if it seems irrelevant, probably a good thing to check because you just never know.
Right.
And this is why things are stated in the docs, as best as possible. So you can go ahead and close out of this. We're probably done here.
I wonder, though, if you had followed the docs to the T and went in order, you would have installed Homebrew first, and Homebrew might override that setting. And then if you install Xcode after Homebrew, it'll install everything in the command line tools properly. So definitely good thing to check that.
That is, and that's actually probably why that occurred, because we did install Homebrew after Xcode,
Right.
and Homebrew did that command line thing. So it was probably switching some tools to use some stuff from Brew, which is what we don't want. So yeah, it's a good note.
This is where things get a little hairy, for me at least. The Ruby stuff.
Let's follow the docs to the letter. Let's see if see if it works for us here. I think that's when in doubt, follow the docs as best you can. I think that's the right way to go.
So we're gonna install Ruby using Brew. Now, what is Ruby used for?
Good question. Ruby is still a pretty key tool chain that is used, or language, if you will, but the whole tool chain around Ruby is also what the iOS community uses for CocoaPods. CocoaPods are very similar to NPM packages for the iOS system altogether. Mm-hmm. So Ruby is sort of an important part of that piece, and we're setting up Ruby so we can then install CocoaPods, which is what we're going to want to do full-blooded iOS development, if you will.
Okay.
So if you need to have Ruby set first in your path for compilers to find Ruby, you may need to set. Let's run just the first one. We could also, by the way, this is a good note about kind of install instructions in general. If you're not sure what to do here, you're not sure if you need to do this at all, open a new terminal and just continue through the install instructions. If you run into an issue, you can refer back to this note right here and just run that command, because maybe it's related to that. There's nothing wrong with doing that. I think it's a good practice to do that, especially if you're one that you're just not sure if you need to do something, if maybe it's just noted, just by default. So in this case, for example, let's open a new terminal to the side. So Command T.
You want to risk it, huh?
Yeah, let's risk it. I think it's good to always do things risky, especially if people learn some. So let's do brew link. And it's very possible that this brew link may fail due to that issue, but at least we'll know.
Okay, it looks like it worked.
And it did note something there. If you need to have the software first in your path instead, okay? So it's mentioned that same note in the other window too. Mm-hmm. Will it matter ultimately? I don't know. We'll see. Let's keep going. And again, you could even open another terminal if you want to just keep your clear eyes for anything worth noting without leaving it. So you've got these two terminal windows over there that have notes in there that you're just not sure you need to do. We're just going to continue on, but leave them as references. So,
good tip. Is this the same, basically the same thing that we saw?
It is. So lo and behold, of course, in the docs, it actually is telling us to do the same thing. So in this case, we actually do see, as we're following the docs, that actually it is a good thing to do there. So if we look at that command, we can see the difference is that one on the top is from Homebrew or the other is from local lib. Let's probably follow the exact path that Ruby told us, because that's going to be the path that we want to use. So if we look at our terminal windows,
and that's
export
the
path,
opt Homebrew opt directory.
Yeah, so it's not exactly how it's stated there. So this is a really important point. I think always with documentation, technical documentation in general, is that it's stating a reference for you to follow there, but the path itself may be specific to your system setup. And in this case, it actually tells us here. So you could probably copy that whole command as is. Yeah, that right there.
So let's go back here, copy this and run it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's do that. And then what about this? This is something I didn't see in the docs.
That I would leave off too. Again, I'd keep it here to the side. You can see if you run into something. But I would probably not run it myself first either. I would see if I run into trouble and at least, again, keep it open for reference if I do run into something. But I think that's a good way to handle things like that in general, because always when you're installing things at any point in time in the future, if you're unsure, it's okay. You can leave it off to the side and come back to it. So yeah, I think we can continue on through the docs. So the next thing is we've got, now we're actually going to use that Ruby setup that we just did there, and we're going to install some necessary parts related to iOS development in general. So let's go ahead and do that.
Let's do CocoaPod installation. Okay, so are there multiple ways of installing CocoaPods?
That is a good question. There probably is another way to install it. I have always used Gem. Maybe there's another way. Maybe there's not.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this is a perfectly good way to do it. Looks like that went pretty quick, so we can continue on through the docs.
What's this Xcode project thing?
Xcode Proj is a CLI tool that you can invoke Xcode processes from the CLI. So NativeScript uses it. A lot of cross-platform frameworks use that under the hood. So that's a good thing and a necessary thing to have. And then now we come upon this note that is a note that just came up, a new note we added in the docs related to 12.3. There are some things in NativeScript CLI that rely on Python 2. Most likely this will go away in the next couple weeks to couple months, probably this year for sure. This note will probably be removed once those are kind of fully on Python 3. But for now, if you're on 12.3, for sure, macOS in particular, you do want to follow this note. This will make sure that Python is set up there, which is used in some of the build tooling. So you can probably go right to those install lines, and just follow those to the letter here.
And just to show people that Python is no longer on the system, if we do a Python command, it'll tell you that it's not found. So Monterey, if you've upgraded to Monterey 12.3, it removes Python altogether from your machine. Not versions higher than 2.7, but 2.7 was the default one, and that removes it, right, Nathan?
That is right.
Okay, so there's PyEnv, and PyEnv is not Python. It's just a way to manage your Python environments. For those of you that use like Conda or MiniForge, kind of like that. So we've got PyEnv, and then the next one is using PyEnv to install a version of Python, in this case 2.7.18.
Yeah, and perhaps this is the longest part of our install setup here, but we are almost done for sure. So we are close to the finish line here.
We're done with the installation. Okay, good. Now, this makes it global. What does that mean?
Yeah, so again, a lot of this Python 2 setup is to make sure that it is set up and seen globally with the system, because the tools will rely on it from a global perspective. So again, just best to follow the docs straight through.
Still not found. Oh, I guess we need this.
Well, right. now you're skipping around. So be very careful. And for anyone out there, really, that's the kind of thing you do not want to do. You can read on, but really try to be mindful of kind of what you're running in the order, because that symlink is very important. It is the thing that if you miss doing that, you would not have it properly installed for sure.
Okay, so does that mean I can run Python on my command line now? Oh, there it is. Very cool.
So that's key. And then, yeah, we probably want to do this. This is just a good rule of measure for sure, but definitely want to do this. Says if you're using Z shell RC. So yeah, same deal. Add this to the Z shell profile.
right.
And then was the next thing stated? Yeah, I think we can go ahead and move on. We can just install pip now, which is the part of the tool chain that uses Python there.
Let's open up a new tab because that's what the instructions said, just to make sure. And install pip. That was
Perfect.
fast.
Says successfully installed. That's great. Yep, we'll do that one.
I always wondered what that package did. 6.
Yeah, it's hard. I think that will always be in use. Some others on the team might be best to ask on that particular note. But again, on these things, again, just following the docs pretty much to the letter. And that's definitely the best way to go.
Now, we've already installed the CLI. Is that going to be an issue or no?
It is not. That's going to be fine.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think we're probably okay. That's if you're not on 12.3 plus. So those are the typical instructions for anything prior to 12.3. Okay. So let's do ns doctor iOS and let's see what we got.
Xproj and CocoaPods.
So this is probably related to environment path. So you opened a new terminal, do CocoaPods, or actually pod -- version here. That is the CocoaPods version there. And yeah, so that's true. So the reason NS Doctor is complaining about that is for sure it doesn't see CocoaPods installed there. So you could try opening a new terminal, just make sure it wasn't, maybe we forgot to open or reload the terminal. And so for sure it's not picking that up. So if we go back up through either the terminal windows that we left open that have the notes or in the docs, we can see if there's anything path related that we perhaps did not do that we might want.
We didn't do this one?
Those ones, yeah, I don't think it's related to that. I think it's definitely more path related. Let's take a look at the Z shell and see what our path looks like. And that is why. So this is a great perhaps note here, at least it seems to be. We have our path that's being set with the platform tools for Android. And then we are also setting a Ruby path there. And I think we do want something just with our path. Let's go back to the docs and let's go through that part where it's talking about CocoaPods. Let's make sure that Ruby is still seen if we do Ruby version here.
Yep, it is.
Okay. Let's see.
No.
Well, we got Jim Pass there. Oh, you know what's interesting? You know what? I think maybe it was right. Maybe the docs were actually right in this case, because the docs state lib, but we copied the opt one, which is the shell path. Maybe that's the problem. So in this case, the docs actually may have been right. We may have stated that wrong. If I would say, change the path to be the one that it states there, which I think is exactly the one that's in the docs. And so it's very possible that here is a case where we should have followed the docs to the letter. Go back to the docs, and I think you can just copy and paste it. The top one, yeah. So a good lesson in reading docs for sure. It got me, and I'm going to guess that's probably the issue.
Let's compare these two side by side.
You can see one actually refers to a Jim's path where the other one did not. So that actually kind of makes sense because we installed Jim's, Xcode Proj, and CocoaPods, and we didn't have that in our path. What we had is just the binaries for Ruby.
Right. So let me keep this one in there just in case, but I'm going to comment it out. And then we'll save this one.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that was my bad. I probably steered you wrong on that one. Good note for myself there, too.
All right, let's see if pod is detected. Hey, look at that.
Hey.
So we've got ns-doctor, which is the command that'll check both environments. And this will check Android and iOS. And if you get all green check marks, you're good to go. Okay, what's next? I think we're good. We made it through the Mac part.
We are good. I think we are set up now. So
what do we do? Create a new app?
Yeah, let's create a new app.
Okay, and that's ns create.
Well, actually, how do you even create an app? Let's go to the docs and look. So we could go to the tutorials, or we could go to development workflow. Either one of those are probably good places to start.
Development workflow. There we go. ns create.
Yeah, that's going to create an app. And there's several different templates you can use. But yeah, let's just start with that.
Look at that. It's a nice interactive CLI. First will be the name of your app, my new NS app. Okay, the framework, Angular, React, Vue, Svelte, TypeScript, and JavaScript. Let's do a plain JavaScript app, no?
Sure.
No. Who does that?
Who does that?
Let's go with Angular.
Okay.
All right, let's do Hello World. Keep it nice and simple. So this uses the Hello World template and the Angular version of that to scaffold out a brand new application. And this is going to be good for iOS and Android. What kind of savage uses plain JavaScript? No, I'm just kidding. Okay, now ns run Android. What if we do ns run? Is it just going to kick both of them up? iOS and Android? Or should we try one at a time first?
You could try one at a time. I mean, what should we do? Yeah, you could probably...
Oh, I need to go to that folder first.
That's probably a good note there. Yeah, let's try running iOS. Yeah.
iOS. Okay, here we go. Moment of truth. Everything coming together right here. There's our sim. Okay, let's move that aside a bit.
And what sim did it open there? iPhone 13, what's it say? iOS 15.4, I guess. So
yep,
perfectly good sim.
Okay, is that an error? No. Oh, it's still doing it. Okay, there it goes. It's installing. Look at that. There it is.
Pretty simple stuff. You know, once you get past through the environment setup, which it's really it's taken us less than 30 minutes. Generally, we've been talking here, but I think setup should generally take you less than 30, 45 minutes.
Well, Xcode is going to take 30 and 45 minutes of that, right?
Well, that's true. Yeah. I mean, if you've got it, those are definitely going to be the longest thing to wait for, where you can't really do anything. You definitely got to install Xcode, install Android Studio. And definitely, depending on your network speed, that's probably the most lengthy part. Once those are installed, though, everything after that Again, typically following the docs. Of course, the one caveat that we mentioned with CocoaPod setup in Ruby, we kind of over-assumed something in the docs and tried to do something otherwise, and it showed us that that's not a good idea. So that's a good note, that you really should take the docs route pretty much as is. Again, the only thing we diverted away from in the docs is instead of brew install Node, we went the pro tip route, set up Node version manager. And again, that's very possible may be the case, that we want to shift the docs away from brew install Node in that case, but it'll probably stay that way for some time longer. So ultimately it is up to you. It just depends on kind of how much control you want as a JavaScript developer over your environment. A Node version manager is going to give you a much more broad control. So that's why it is always sort of a pro tip to use a Node version manager for that kind of thing.
Okay. This is looking pretty good so far. Now, as a side note, have you noticed any issues with the latest Android simulators or emulators on the Apple Silicon machines?
I have not. Nothing jumps to mind. I've had a really good experience on M1. When I first had an M1 Air, maybe last year, right when those came out, when they had the dev kits, there were definitely a couple things there to consider, but all that has sort of come to pass. So it's a pretty good experience. I mean, the docs are definitely set up to mention anything specific to M1 if there is anything anymore, which I don't even know if it mentions M1 in there anymore, because I think everything is set up sort of natively, depending whether you're on ARM or an Intel Mac. So
yeah,
should have a pretty good experience.
I'd say that was pretty quick turnaround for Google to build everything and support ARM. Now, is it me or is this thing taking really long time?
Your first build, especially on Android, it's a brand new setup. Really didn't have anything extra set up. It might take you a moment, but yeah, there's an Android app. So we've got iOS and Android up and running now, and you should be in full shape to develop really at this point. I think the only other considerations, like as far as Android goes, is like, again, if you're developing an app with Google Play services, you may want to go set up an emulator with Google Play services in it. I think that default emulator that we found from Android Studio, I'm pretty sure does not have Google Play, but that's also why we went in the SDK manager, looked at the setup of SDK 32 and made sure that all the stuff kind of related to SDK 32 were there, including Google Play related things. So you should, like now, if you were to go and set up another emulator, you could probably set up a Google Play enabled one. And then the emulator will always launch, I think pretty typically it will always launch the last emulator you had open. So if you are developing against some Google Play service enabled app, you could open that from Android Studio and then close it. And then the next time you run it from the CLI here, it should default to open that new emulator that you had created.
Okay. I've noticed they've added a little bit of a stretchy kind of feel to it now. That's kind of new for Android.
That's the Android 12. I forget what they call that, but yeah, that was introduced in 12.
Well, thanks. Looks like we're up and running on both platforms, and we've got a mobile development environment using NativeScript all set up. Thanks for coming on and guiding me through this. I feel pretty confident now that I can use this machine for my endeavors.
It looks like a nice machine, Alex. Good luck in your endeavors. And like always, if you run into an issue with install, post on the repo. We definitely will try to look at it very quickly and as best we can, try to get an appropriate fix out there for you if you find something. So, good luck in setting it up. Let us know.
Thanks, Nathan.